Washington, former President Barack Obama is taking on an increasingly public role as the nation confronts a confluence of historic crises that has exposed deep racial and socioeconomic inequalities in America and reshaped the November election. In doing so, Obama is signaling a willingness to sharply critique his successor, President Donald Trump, and fill what many Democrats see as a national leadership void. On Wednesday, he held a virtual town hall event with young people to discuss policing and the civil unrest that has followed the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Obama rejected a debate he said he'd seen come up in a little bit of chatter on the internet about voting versus protests, politics and participation versus civil disobedience and direct action. This is not an either-or. This is a both and to bring about real change, he said during the town hall hosted by his foundation My Brother's Keeper Alliance, which supports young men of color. We both have to highlight a problem and make people in power uncomfortable, but we also have to translate that into practical solutions and laws that could be implemented and monitored and make sure we're following upon. Obama called for turning the protests over Floyd's death into policy change to ensure safer policing and increased trust between communities and law enforcement. He urged every mayor in the country to review your use of force policies with their communities and commit to report on planned reforms before prioritizing their implementation. We're in a political season, but our country is also at an inflection point, said Valerie Jarrett, a longtime friend and advisor to Obama. President Obama is not going to shy away from the dialogue simply because he is not in office anymore. During the roundtable, Obama drew parallels between the unrest sweeping America currently and protest movements of the 1960s. But he said polls show a majority of Americans supporting today's protesters and forming a broad coalition in a way much of the country didn't back then, despite some of the recent protests having been marred by the actions of a tiny minority that engaged in violence. Still, he warned, at some point, attention moves away, and protests dwindle in size, so it is important to take the moment that has been created as a society, as a country, and say let us use this to finally have an impact. Obama was already beginning to emerge from political hibernation to endorse Joe Biden's Democratic presidential bid when the coronavirus pandemic swept across the US, killing more than people, and the economy began to crater. The crisis scrambled the Biden campaign's plans for how to begin deploying Obama as their chief surrogate ahead of the November election, but also gave the former president a clear opening to start publicly arguing what he has signaled to friends and associates privately for the past 3 years, that he does not believe Trump is up for the job. Addressing graduates of historically black colleges and universities last month, Obama said the pandemic had, finally torn back the curtain on the idea that so many of the folks in charge know what they're doing. And in a nationally televised broadcast celebrating graduating high school seniors, Obama said many so-called grown-ups, including some with fancy titles and important jobs, do only what is convenient and feels good. Floyd's death, however, has drawn a more visceral and personal reaction from the nation's first black president. Floyd, a black man, died after a white police officer pressed his knee into Floyd's neck for several minutes even after he stopped moving and pleading for air. In a lengthy written statement last week, Obama said that while he understood that millions of Americans were eager to just get back to normal when the pandemic abates, it shouldn't be forgotten that normal life for people of color in the US involves being treated differently on account of their race.